Hey there. So today we're talking about scope creep. If you're not familiar with what this is, I will fill you in. I'm sure you've experienced it, but maybe the term is foreign to you. So this is when work you're doing on a project extends beyond the scope of your agreement or the deliverables of the project. Basically, it's the project changing so that you're doing more work than what you're getting paid for. And we absolutely don't want this in our business for obvious reasons. So, how do you know if you're experiencing scope creep? So, a few examples here. One common one is additional revisions. So, even if your contract with a client includes 2 rounds of revisions, clients will sometimes come back and ask for another round or rounds of revisions, right? That's a form of scope creep. Or another example, maybe you agreed to design a logo, but the client is coming back and asking for maybe a horizontal version of that logo, and that wasn't factored into your original price. Or maybe you designed a booklet for printing in spreads, and now the client needs a digital format in single pages that can easily be read on the screen and downloaded like as a PDF. Another one that might be a little surprising is a delayed or extended project schedule. Now, this is a form of scope creep. Moving a schedule not only affects other projects you're working on, but when a project is delayed, it loses momentum. I'm sure you've had this happen. I know I have many times. And then it requires extra effort from you when you go to reboot that project. So you and your client now have to spend more time getting back up to speed on the project goals, where things left off, how to move forward. And not to mention, if that project was severely delayed, maybe you've raised your prices during that time. So now you're finishing an old project at rates lower than what you should be making. And finally, a big one that I've noticed is that when there is a team of clients we're working with, so many cooks in the kitchen, for example, scope creep can really take hold because there are so many opinions to juggle. So we talked about how to spot scope creep. So how do we prevent this? How do we manage it when it does happen to us? So first of all, managing projects is a complex skill, so don't be too hard on yourself. This happens to everyone. It still happens to me, and I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I've gotten pretty good at spotting it and mitigating it, but it does still try to sneak in. Scope creep is sneaky, right? That's why they call it creep. It's just kind of like a little bit at a time. It kind of wiggles its way in there. So prevention really is the best medicine. Most of the time, in my experience, scope creep happens because the project has not been thoroughly, and I mean thoroughly, thought out and then written out in a tight proposal and contract, or you might call it an agreement. And what I mean by this is listing the exact deliverables down to the formats, the types of files, the number of revisions, and then also what you're doing is anticipating any additional needs and including those in your scope of work and price ahead of time. So this can, after you do a few projects, you might learn like, oh, if I do a logo design, the client's probably going to ask me for a brand guide to go with it, or at least a quick, logo usage guide. I'm just going to include that in my package from now on and make sure I'm including that in my pricing as well. So that's one way to kind of anticipate additional needs and include them. Next, you want to always create a timeline, a schedule, and make sure to tell the client what happens if they don't meet the schedule. Are they just bumped down the line? Are they put on hold for a while? Do they pay a fee to start the project back up? Make sure there are some real consequences attached to them not following the schedule. And this is a tough one. I have a really hard time sticking to this, but when I do, it makes a huge difference. Next, you want to communicate your policies for how you will or won't accept feedback on projects. So, for example, we require consolidated feedback from one designated member of the client team when we're working with a team of clients. And the person that their designated client team representative, this is determined during your onboarding process, and it makes a huge improvement in just how the project flows in general. So doing all of these things makes it so much easier to discuss with the client. If a problem comes up, it makes it so much easier if things are clear like this from the beginning in writing. They're clear about what they're getting and how the process of working with you will go and what happens if they deviate from that process. So when a problem does pop up, you can easily refer back to your signed agreement or contract. You can say something like, per our agreement, that additional file you're asking for is not included. I'd be happy to add it for X dollars, and it will take me an additional X number of days to complete. Let me know if you'd like to move forward with that, and I'll add it to the agreement. Or some companies prefer that you create a change order, so you could go that route too. So let's say you find yourself in some sort of scope creep situation and you have not taken the preventative steps I just mentioned. What do you do? How do you manage it? Well, think first, just briefly, about what they're asking for. If it's a very small ask that isn't going to take you very much time, like a minor extra round of revisions that, just a few copy changes, weigh for yourself if it's really a big deal. So I'm a big fan of over-delivering for clients if they've been pleasant to work with. So in this case, if the project has gone smoothly, they're a great client, they just had a few more copy changes, I typically won't charge extra for that. So you can let them know, hey, I'm happy to add in this minor round of changes at no extra charge. Normally, I include 2 rounds of revisions in my work. So this prepares them for next time, but also shows that you are willing to go the extra mile for them. Now, if the client is asking for something bigger, like maybe the earlier example of resizing a booklet so it can be read digitally on screen, this may seem, just keep in mind that this may seem like a quick and easy ask to your client because they don't know the steps involved. You know that it's more work than that. So you can come back and say, hey, I'd be happy to do this for you. This is a significant amount of work that would be considered an additional project. And then you can quickly walk them through the steps required. Keep this very brief. You don't want to go into every single detail, but there are things you would have to do to move from spreads to single pages, like adjusting the footers so that the page numbers are all consistently in the bottom, right corner, things like that. Just think through the time-consuming steps that you would have to go through. And then you can offer them a price and a timeline, similar to what we did in the previous example. Another good example might be that, let's say you designed a flyer for the client, and then they would like you to resize it for a print ad. Now, you can approach this in kind of a similar way. This would be an additional project. Be happy to do this for you. The price for this typically falls in the range of X dollars to X dollars, which includes 2 rounds of revisions and final file preparation for printing. And then if you don't know all the details yet, you can say, I can confirm an exact price once I know your deadline and I have a look at your publication's sizing and print setup requirements, right? Because you don't know if you're going from 8.5 by 11 to 2x3 or 5x7, or what this particular publication may need from you as far as file type, all those good things. So a project, this is how I always handle it, because until you know the full details of what you're dealing with, you really can't give an accurate price. And you can also let them know, hey, a project like this typically requires a week-long timeline, and I could start on X date. It wouldn't be a week from today where you're talking about the project. It's a week from when you're actually able to get it in your schedule. So make sure you factor that in so they're not thinking that you're going to jump on it immediately and have it to them within, have it wrapped up within 1 week. So just some things to think about as you're scoping that additional piece. So in my experience, handling some of these additional scope things can go well or poorly, and honestly, it depends on your client's outlook and honestly, just their demeanor. Most clients understand that if they're asking for more work, there will be more money and time required. But some clients just aren't knowledgeable about the process, and some of them are just looking for a good deal. So in these cases where I have to push back a little bit, I find it's usually on me to dig up some courage, put my business hat on, and stand up for myself in a kind, professional, but direct manner, so the client sees that I am confident, even if I don't feel like it. I respect my business as well as theirs, and that's going to come through when you start standing up for yourself on these things. I've also learned it's okay to be okay with some clients saying no thank you and just moving on. What I try to focus on is there's always a lesson to be gleaned if we take the time to look for it. So maybe things didn't go as we wanted, but what did we learn for it? How can we improve our process and put maybe some additional verbiage in our agreements? How can we put some of these preventative steps in place now so that things go better next time? All right, so let's summarize here really quickly. First of all, make your agreements extremely clear and detailed about what the client gets or what they don't get for the amount of money and the time that you're committing to. Let them know what happens if the timeline slips. Next, communicate how you will accept feedback or project notes. Consider designating one person on the client's side so the process is smooth and time isn't wasted on a bunch of back and forth. Finally, remember you are a business owner. Paying more for additional work is completely normal and should be expected by clients if they ask for more. Maybe some small revisions can be done without extra payment, but for larger asks, really stand your ground, be professional and kind, but straightforward about what you require, time and money-wise, to do additional work for them. It might feel hard the first few times, but I promise it gets better, and you deserve to be paid for your work. So if that means pushing yourself a bit out of your comfort zone, I hope you'll be courageous and do it. You will be glad you did. All right, hope that helps you today.